Hello, I'm Gary from Lantana Removal Queensland, and I'm here today to talk about lantana. So, since starting the business, I've started to do inquiries into the state and federal government, asking them what the deal is with lantana. I've asked the Department of Primary Industries and the Mines and Resources, and basically what I'm told is the process is that the councils are actually supposed to be the ones that are responsible for the actual policy and actual work in relation to this weed of national significance. Now, there's a lot more weeds which are even far more invasive and far worse than lantana, but lantana provides such a habitat that nothing can penetrate, that ends up protecting those other weeds where they're running rampant. There's instances around, not far from us, where the cat's claw and other weeds like that, climbing vines and weeds, are just complete canopies, and then the lantana is a complete canopy around that canopy to protect it. And yet the councils do nothing about these things. A couple of days ago, took a drive. The drive would be 50 to 60 k's long, and the lantana through this shire, through Moreton Bay Regional Council, is just complete blanket down both sides of the road for as far as you can see, and that would continue for the next 100 k's, no problems at all. And that's without going off the road, like down side roads, where the lantana disappears off into the sunset down the side roads. Watercourses for the urban utilities for Southeast Queensland Water are just choked and infested with this material for 500 metres to a kilometre before it gets to the watercourse, and nothing's being done. So I contacted Brisbane City Council at the end of last year through Lord Mayor Quirk, and I asked about our providing services in the removal of it, because we've been removing it for over 30 years and our success rate is extreme. We eradicate it from 95% to 100%, depending on how and where the infestation is. Now, trying to break into that loop of that group of people is a very difficult thing, because I contacted the report writer that wrote for the DPI the procedures and policies and ways of handling lantana, which I don't agree with. I've had a good look through the material, and I would love to have a proper look at the actual process that was used to make the findings and the recommendations, because they simply don't play out in the real world where we've worked for the last 30 years. But having said that, they utilise the services of Landcare quite a lot, which is a not-for-profit organisation, and I was recommended by the report writer to contact them. Now, I contacted 4 of their head people around Southeast Queensland and never ever got a response. Yet where I now advertise on Facebook and things like that, I get responses saying, oh, they're doing a fantastic job, which they are. Anybody who's knocking out lantana is doing a fantastic job. I'm a part of the system. I don't want to be bagging anybody else, but it seems as though they don't like my being in competition. Yet I never had a response to any of that. But anyway, through Lord Mayor Quirk's office, which I have respect for, it was said that I would be contacted early this year, which it's now April and I still haven't been contacted, by the sections on North Brisbane. I was contacted by a fairly high up guy who oversees all of the weed and management structure. On the first discussion that we had, he said that he would get those people to contact me, which is fair enough, and I can, twice he said that. And then I received a letter after that from the Lord Mayor Quirk's office saying that that had been referred through and the people would contact me there, and nobody's ever contacted. But in my asking that gentleman about the process and stuff like that, he suggested I advertise my services for them through the through the portal, the Brisbane City Council portal. But interestingly, he suggested that I set up a what's the name there where they could all attend, and I would show them my processes if it was actually revolutionary or a what's the name, then I could demonstrate my processes for them. But it had to be for free. What business that their work is basically their sales ability, their unique selling feature, is going to take everybody along for the ride and show them how they do the work? It's beyond me to understand that statement. But anyway, so I wasn't smart about it, so I said, yep, okay, no worries, we'll leave it at that, and then I'll wait to be contacted by these guys. The next day I wrote to him and I said, listen, tell you what, how about if, is there anywhere that you guys are removing material and I can come and have a look at that area, and then I'll know if I can be of service to you or not? Well, he was not happy, and he wrote back to me saying that, you know what, I'm way too busy to be bothered, answering that stuff. I oversee way too big operations, and I wouldn't be interested in even contemplating a response to that. So it was quite a annoyed, very upset process, yet he wanted me to supply my expertise for free to them for their appraisal. And if you did that, all that you'd be doing is educating them on how you do it, and then if it was any good to them, they'd take over your abilities and what you do and make it their own or call it their own. Now, as I said before, I really call into question the actual information being branded by the government as far as Lantana is concerned, because if you look back, they've been using 5 million hectares as the infested area for a very long time. Now, I don't know when they started using 5 million hectares, because they are not even at this stage keeping up with the growth of the material. Right? You can drive through, I think I said that before, drive through for around 50 k's without any trouble at all through the Moreton Shire here. That's not going down many, that's just main roads, and never lose sight of it on both sides of the road in a complete infestation that's impenetrable. And then down every watercourse, it continues down every watercourse. So you look at it and you go, well, they're not even keeping up with the growth of the stuff. It can't be 5 million hectares. It'd have to be 10 times that would be more likely, or could be even more than that, because the growth of the material when you have rainfall like we've had in early 2018, it just has this material going nuts, and it protects the even worse weeds. And yet there are some interesting relationships between the councils and some of these organisations that does now, considering that response, make you wonder about asking those questions. And yet you're a private citizen that should have the right to have very simple questions answered, given that the state and federal government say that these people are the ones responsible for that process. So it does, because obviously resources are not being put into those actual problems. And that's another place that really needs to be addressed, is that Lantana is absolutely out of control, yet the only places that they are really spending any real money on it is in the state forest and national parks around where the tourist industry is there, and that's where the Landcare Australia is really, really strong in that system of removal. Now, that's not bagging them. Again, any removal of Lantana is a fantastic thing. The fact that there are so many volunteers involved is actually just a magnificent statement on how those people feel about that particular subject. But you look at from Currumbin right through here and all the way up North Queensland, all the way, it is just out of control. and nothing is being done for it. On a scale, you can say nothing is being done for it. You know, the amount of resources being put towards its removal and its demise is negligent. It's negligible. There's nothing being done. Okay? And they use the process and statement that, oh, well, it's too expensive a problem to be able to do it. When really a lot of the actual truth of the fact is that so much government, so much Crown land, so much council land, so much main roads department down the sides of the roads is absolutely infested, and it is contaminating the private properties. The material must be removed from watercourses, sides of roads, and steep terrain. The steep terrain infects the lower country. The watercourses infect the whole lot. It just is a continued cycle. Now, the government uses these lies and these absolutely false representations that they can't afford to tackle the subject. Okay? The fact of the matter is, you cannot afford, as they have done, to ignore this situation. You know, they restrict people from removing vegetation or removing trees and things like that because it affects the fauna, because the country is in such a bad shape environmentally. But the reality is, all of this fauna has to walk for miles and miles and miles to try and get around the infestations of the lantana. Now, money. It's not their bloody money. It's our money. It's the taxpayers' money. You know, fancy having to explain economics and the economy to the government. But considering how they run the country, it's a very obvious situation. But the thing is that when they spend the money, people supply jobs to other people. Those people pay taxes and buy things. And the money goes where? Let me see if I can figure that one out, because the politicians can't figure this one out. Oh, that's right, the money goes back to the government coffers. So whatever dollar they put in, they got $1 or more dollars back when it came back to them. How can they possibly use a statement like, it's too costly to actually eradicate the problem? Yes, I accept and understand that the studies that were done by their scientists and the policies and procedures that they say are the actual findings are completely wrong. You know, we've eradicated lantana, as many farmers have, for the last 30 plus years, and done it without any problems at all. In our case, we don't even use chemicals. And it's eradicated, it's finished, it's gone, it's destroyed, it's burnt, it's out of there. So at the end of the day, why do they say that they can't tackle the subject? With false data. The data, I'd love to see how they came up with their findings, because it's simply not factual. You know, they say this is the only policy, the only way to do it is you slash it. Well, you slash it, you spread it. Simple as that. Unless you mow that ground all the time, yes, you'll beat it there. But if you slash it, it will spread the seed. Oh, but then we poison it. Once we slashed it, we poison it. We run in there and we poison it. Really? Well, all of the lantana that I've seen in the last 30 years has so much mycorrhizal fungi and other soil highways that when you poison that lantana after you've cut it off, it just spreads it through the whole system. I've seen areas where the vegetation is completely gone. You know, the only place that it might work is when you've got a rainforest that has so much strength in the vegetation that you don't kill all the rest of the vegetation. But I've seen many places like the back of Mount Cootha where the whole place is like a napalm strike. You know, and that's what they call a success on their policies of the scientists coming up with the poisons to use on it. The poisons follow those underground, subterranean, names, which link all the plants together, and you're poisoning the whole system. It's just crazy, the systems they say. Or they use the policy to say, well, you know, the only earth-moving side of things that you can do is just to push the whole top of the mountain down to the bottom of the mountain, take all the vegetation with it, and then that's done. But then the erosion and everything else means it's not a viable option. Who the heck came up with those solutions to those problems? That's what I'd like to know. Was it just the scientists said that that was how you do that, or was it somebody else came up with it? Because it doesn't make any sense to me. But it is the policy. It is what they say is the procedures to deal with the material. So anyway, after 30 years of us doing this stuff, we have no problems eradicating lantana. So if you need lantana eradicated, give us a call at Lantana Removal Queensland. We operate out of Narangba over on the north side of Brisbane, but we go all over with that. Large areas, small areas, we do it all. So yeah, basically. But lantana, the important part is that it's done properly the first time. Otherwise it's great for my business. It'll just keep coming back, and you just keep paying for it, and you just keep paying for it. Or get it done once, pay it properly once. Okay, I'm not saying it's going to be the cheapest thing you ever do in the world, but anything you spend there will add to your property values. You know, and that's what's probably going to change in the near future. Is property values are going to fall for properties that are infested with lantana. Because people are going to start to get to the point where they understand how much money is actually involved in the removal of it, you know. So it's something that really needs to be addressed in the future, because the lands that are infecting the private lands are just incredible. And the government has the policy of not rocking the boat, because if they rock the boat, then they're going to have to say to the private landholders, you also need to actually do something about it as well. Which is fair enough, but you've got to have started it at some point. Because at the moment you've got Crown and government lands infesting private homes. Well, you can't get the private homes to clean up until you clean yours up. Well, at some stage you need to deal with it. And because we're the experts at dealing with steep terrain, where it needs to come out of first. It needs to come out of the high country first and work back down towards the water courses. But then the water courses need to be pretty much addressed in the same manner that the high country does. It really needs to be addressed. And that's one of our biggest strengths, is working with the environment with the minimal possible damage you can do, because then you're spending more money on the rejuvenation. But having said that, you've got to understand, many of these infestations are in ravines and valleys within the high country, infesting everything for hundreds of kilometres down to the ocean. And it might be even more than hundreds of kilometres, because it winds and meanders its way down there. But those infestations are the ones that are just continuing the infestation. They have to be addressed. And that's one of the places that they used as the excuse that you can't get that material out of there. Well, we can get the material out of there, you know. Once it's gone from those areas, then it's only a matter of keeping up with the seeding and competing it out. The big thing with that stuff there is I've seen 100-year-old infestations. Now, how the hell does an infestation stay for 100 years in the worst country that you could allow it to be? It has names that are the size of my forearm, of my arm there. Okay, not my forearm. That's why I did it, because it's that thick. Okay, 100-year-old lantana. Now that cost for those landowners, for those people, is enormous, because it's in steep terrain. But it's worse because that infestation is so strong. They've allowed that to grow there for the 100 years. There is nothing underneath it. When you take that material out, there is no forestation underneath it. It has killed every tree that it's climbed. The devastation to the whole fauna system and the soil life is complete. There is nothing left there. So turning around and crying poor when you've allowed that to be the scenario is what is really, really offensive. It needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed very seriously, because the amount of damage to the fauna having to walk for miles and miles and miles to try and walk around infestations. The fuel load that was underneath that job was astronomical. I mean, you could not imagine the truckloads. There would have been 10 semi-trailer loads of timber in just 3 acres in dead timber and down timber under that infestation. And that infestation was at least 20 foot high, and then up to 40 foot and 60 feet in the trees. But everything was dead. You know, well, that's their problem that was left for that long. But the government's caused that because they say there's no effective way to get at it and get it done. You know, when you start dealing in very, very steep terrain, yes, it's costly, but you can't turn a blind. It's a cancer. You cannot turn a blind eye to it, because the other weeds that end up going along with it choke out everything, and then it's complete devastation. And the cost factor then with that sort of stuff is much higher. It's much more difficult, but it needs to be done. You cannot hide from this. It's already out of control, but some of the areas that it's out of control, it has to be pulled back. You cannot have waterways choked with this stuff and sides of the roads choked with this stuff. It feeds off that water coming off that hard surface like it's going out of fashion. It's the number one. It's like throwing petrol on the Lantana. And then everywhere that it washes from that point on downstream, you follow it, you can chase it through the properties. And it all relates back to it's been allowed to grow there by the councils, by the main roads department, by the government departments that have ignored it, by the energex departments that try to fight their way through it to keep power going. It's an endless cycle that has to be redressed. It is not. They said that its number one thing is through birds and fauna. You know, it's travelling the watercourses more than it's ever being transmitted by those guys. But see, once you say that, it has to come out of the high country first and worked its way down through those things off all the hard shoulders and be properly removed so that it doesn't continue to come back and continue to be a problem. And we are the ones with the process and the understanding from 30 plus years of experience of doing it that have the techniques, the equipment and the manpower to be able to deliver those results. But we cannot keep ignoring it. The greenies need to get on board and start understanding that we've been played for fools. And I don't mean you're fools, I mean we've been played. The lies that we're told by councils that they cannot afford to take on this monster are simply not true. Absolutely not true. They just choose not to take it on because they don't want to take it on. It's not their money they're spending, it's our money. Any money that's created within an industry to get rid of this menace will be paid back to the government. How did the government lose in that scenario? And it's not like a friggin' a tunnel that was built that doesn't work, doesn't even make the payments on the tunnel. This is a living, growing nightmare that continues to expand. So their 5 million hectares now cannot be anything like that. It must be enormous, the infestation figure. But every dollar ends up going back to the government. How is this not worth getting on top of this? We have lost so much Australian bushland to this menace. We've lost that much fauna to this menace. The fauna, have you ever seen a koala trying to walk for miles around the infestation of the Lantana? And yet the council wants to lie to you, deceitfully lie to you, and say if you want to take those gum trees down, that's a terrible thing, while there's a sea of Lantana that stops the animals from ever getting to any of that vegetation. Lies, lies, lies. Absolute lies. They need to start getting serious about this infestations and get them taken care of. Create another industry. Geez, they're always talking about needing more jobs. Well, get it started. Start putting the money where it needs to go. get the people like us out there into the systems and get this stuff out of there. And where in our situation you're doing it so ethically and ecology friendly that you've got the lightest footprint imaginable, without using poisons to destroy the rest of the system. It's time that the government started to tell the truth, you know, and we started to get something to change. Anyway, look, I'm Gary for Lantana Removal Queensland. My son and I do all the work ourselves. We operate without any problem at all up to 20 degrees. Over 20 to 30 degrees, it's a little more work. And then over that we can go further. We have other systems that we use. Our footprint is the lightest imaginable. We even have materials that we can put in place after we've been there if there is any damage done to regenerate the growth. We also do seeding and other regenerative situations if need be. And if you've left lantana there for great periods of time that it is the sole cover, then there's going to have to be regenerative processes. But even from the water truck on down, we have the means to take care of that situation. So give us a call, 0466 716 830. We hope to have the website up and running shortly. At the moment we're just running through our bettertreeremoval.com.au website, but we will have a proper website up for our thing soon. Okay, thank you very much for stopping by. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the information. Bye bye.